This is how we transport the cannon and its limber to the events. We also have an enclosed trailer. This trailer came with a gun. We purchased this gun a couple of years ago from a gentleman that was using it for target practice on the event. We just took it to competition shooting, so it had been barely used. So while they set that up, we're going to leave the limber on, but this is called the limber. This is the limber box, so that's the chest that would hold the ammunition. Okay, caisson would be a four-wheel wagon with two limber boxes on it.
It's like what they bury the presidents on. When they carry the casket, that's a caisson.
That's what a caisson is, but in this case, so what it was just used. Correct me if I'm wrong, do they usually have like one caisson per battery or for 6 guns?
Something like that. And what it is those boxes, if you look at them, they got a pin in them. You pull the pins in, and they lift the box off and put another box on it. You can imagine how heavy. Imagine doing that with a 24-pounder.
So this limber would service one gun. Right. Each gun would have one of these limbers. That would normally be about 20 or 30 paces back from the gun. And then farther back than that would be the caisson with the rest of the ammunition. So this would only hold enough for a few rounds, a few minutes of fire. And then they'll replace it. Once that box is empty, like I said, they'll swap the box out with the caisson.
Well, when the projectile is in there, cannonball, I guess,
yeah.
How many people does it take to lift that? 4?
Well, at least. Of course, the empty would probably just take 2. Go back. But, normally the battery would have right here would have you'd have 2 cannons in a section with a section commander.
When I was in the Marine Corps, we did not use these. Well, this is probably why I have some range of hearing that's not where it should be. It used to be.
You have 3 sets of 6 more. The captain's speed. Airport, and of course, you have multiple.
I'll turn my hearing aids off.
Is there anybody here not familiar with how that fires? It's like striking a match and there's powder in there.
How many men in the battery? How many horses?
Over 100.
Over 100 men and
You had the cannoneers, you had harriers, I guess, that take care of the horses.
Yep. Blacksmiths, carpenters.
Medics, had to learn all the positions because one, you might have been injured, killed, or just exhausted. You have to swap somebody. And we do that today. All of us. Mainly for the last one, exhaustion.
Yeah.
Or everybody wants to get a chance.
And that limber would have been back in that tree line back there, so you can imagine it would have run back and forth with a round. And they didn't fight in the wintertime. They fought in June and July and August.
So that's the limber boxes where the ammunition or the charges around is kept. Also accoutrements, things like this. And this where you have keep your primers. We'll go through maybe we can take 4. Basically, this is the primer. This is what triggers. It's got a small amount of gunpowder and a little bit of wax on the end, and then this brass pin, and that's pulled, it creates a spark. Shoots a flame down into a hole that punts in the bag of gunpowder.
read about
Sure.
how
Historical preservation.
It doesn't take long to shoot shots, which is one of the reasons why we swab the wear around. And they did this back in the day too. It was not so much to clean the tube as it was to cool it down. and put out any embers that might be smoldering inside before you
So you write that down?
You got a bucket of water, they put that in there, spin it out just not so it's got blood. In between every single shot, you sponge it out. That's how they kept it cool. In the heat of a battle, in the battle, this barrel is blowing red. And they even get hot when we do our guys. They'll get hot.
So do you go to competitions with it?
I haven't personally done any target competitions. This one, it is a rifle gun, so I didn't explain. So our other two guns are smooth bore, so that was the early war, where the tubes were cast in iron, but they were smooth. They didn't have any rifling inside. This one is actually a cast, but it's wrapped in a boilerplate steel, so it's much stronger. And it's rifled, so there's groove, spiral groove cut into it. So the projectiles will come out spinning like a football, which of course gives you much greater distance and more accuracy. Smooth bore kind of bounce around as it went out the tube, and whichever direction it was hit when it came out the muzzle is where it went.
Sometimes you were best off being the target.
Yeah.
Most of the time there was a gunner on Gettysburg that said once they entered the field and saw ordnance guns, they knew they had a bad day. He said an unrattled gunner could shoot the bottom out of a flour barrel at 1,000 yards.
Can you speak to the fuses? How that worked on them?
Yeah, we don't have our motto.
Oh, I didn't know what we're doing. They're another.
That's okay. So there was about 4 basic kinds of projectiles. There was solid shot, which is what we think of when you're cannonballs. Solid cannonball, which were measured by weight, 6 pounder, 10 pound, 12 pounder. And then that was a solid shot. That would be used if you're trying to puncture holes in fortifications, or maybe targeting another cannonball. Then there was the shell, which is an empty ball, okay, filled with more black powder. The fuse would be like a rope sticking out, basically. And the gunner would call for 2-second fuse, 3-second fuse, 4-second fuse, whatever. He's got a table back here that he knows based on the elevation. That elevated screw right there, you can adjust the elevation. So based on the elevation and how much of a charge you've got, how many ounces of black powder you've got, he knows about how far that projectile is going to go. Okay? And he wants that shell to explode about 15 feet over the head of the enemy to do the most damage to the shrapnel. So the fuse, depending on the length, would time it like a timer. The shorter the fuse, the quicker it's going to go off. And so if it goes off too soon, it'll last for a longer fuse. Or if it lands on the ground and explodes, it'll last for a longer, shorter fuse. So that was a shell. Then there was something called a case of shrapnel, which was like a shell, but it also had the added pleasure of little steel iron balls.
So a giant soup can.
And well, I'll get to that. There was something that we don't have in our school, which is called shrapnel because I just read it was invented by a general named Shrapnel. And it would do the same thing. It would explode overhead, but it also had these lead or iron balls that would scatter when it blew up. That was pretty nasty. But the worst is the canister. That was the bloodiest one, because now the canister is like a tin can, about that long, filled with iron balls packed in sawdust. It didn't have a fuse. What happened is, as it came out of the gun with such force, it ripped open and scattered those balls just like a shotgun. So that was used when you had infantry advancing on you within a couple hundred yards. It's kind of your last resort before you got overrun if you didn't take them all out.
So your shells, are they transported with a fuse already in them? And then they cut it?
I think they would have a length of fuse. They would cut some off.
What ignited it? The charge itself?
Yeah,
Flame
yeah.
goes around the ball.
Yeah, exactly. So when the powder explodes, the flame goes around the ball and ignites the fuse as it goes out.
So do the gunners put the fuse in on the powder charge side?
No, on the facing outside.
Facing outside, just the
Yeah, so imagine a ball with a hole in the end of it.
right,
Behind there is a cloth bag that's filled with gunpowder, black powder,
right.
and a wooden base on it called a sabot, and strapped together with a little bit of steel strap. And so the fuse would be on the very end.
Right.
You got a spectator.
If the fuse, Frank, was facing inside, you fired it,
That's
it
what
was blowing the fuse up into the ball, and it would detonate inside the barrel, and that's not good for anything.
Right. So, so it just was the explosion of the charge itself as it went out would ignite the fuse.
You gotta be really careful to not make a mistake. When you're really pressed, you got enemies charging you here.
Well, this is the thing too. This is something we practice when we drill. Is that you've got to give audible signals and visible signals for every action you do, because in the heat of the battle, it is very, very noisy and smoky, and you don't want to get out of sequence, right? Because everything, as you'll see, everything has to be done in a particular sequence. If you lose your place, it can be very dangerous, right? So, for example, if you already have a round loaded and you go to load another one, now you got a double charge, which can be fun, but it can also be dangerous.
Especially if you got a cannonball in front of it.
Yeah. So yeah, audible signals, you'll hear they'll say out loud what step we just did. And visible, you see number 4, which is the trigger man basically put his arm up, that means we're loaded and ready. You won't do that until he's sure that everything is safe and secure. What else do I want to say before we go into
The old saying against the gun was because someone was tied to the front of the gun, right?
yeah.
So that when it set off, kind of a messy
It would be
execution.
messy. It would be very messy. We don't want to be in front of the gun at really at any time. And you'll see that even when they work the gun, they're swabbing it or they're warming. You always stand to the side. Do that work. Never in front of it. Just as a safety precaution. You don't cross in front of it. I want to go around behind it. It's just, it's a good practice.
Common sense.
Common sense.
Yeah, this won't move, but you put a cannonball in, it'll go back about 8 feet. You don't want to be behind it when it's rolling, because it's heavy.
Or behind the wheels, or your foot under the wheel.
Did they anchor it to the ground?
No.
No?
It
would
rolls
recoil.
spade grips.
They said it recoil anywhere from a few feet to several yards, depending on the size of the projectile. And they'd have to roll it back into position and re-aim it every time. I don't imagine you could really
It
aim
seemed like-
one without it just
Yeah.
It seems like if that was mobile, that it would take the energy away from the projectile. Has to a degree. It doesn't-
well, but all it would end up doing probably is digging a hole in the dirt.
Yeah.
Well, it's like when you see the
get
old
stuck.
naval movies, those were tethered. Because you didn't want to slide across the other side of the ship and wiping out the gun crew across.
Sure.
So those were tethered. It's also how you brought it back in the battery. And you sure didn't want to try and load that with a barrel sticking out.
Yes, you had to roll it back.
It would kick back and then they'd load it back out again.
Yeah, we were in Selma. We had a couple of moments where we had to roll it. March. Hey, get the meds. This is a drill. As you go through the drill, I want you to call out your position number and tell us what it is you do at that point in the drill. We usually have more than one duty. Hello? Pit clear. Garrett, I'm number
number 3, and when he says load, I come up to make sure the vent's clear and there's nothing in the tube. I hit him with this wire, and then I've got a wet thumb patch, and I put it over the vent. That way, no air will be sucked in when they worm it and when they sponge it. In case there's some, there's still some debris down there, gunpowder or anything.
Okay, so when he's done, we'll say vent clear. And that's the signal for number 2 man.
Two, it's the worm. Basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to come in and run the worm down the tube to the back of the barrel, try to pull out any type of debris that might be in there. That's basically what we're going to do with that. Worm.
And then number 1 steps in.
I'm the number 1 man. You can see this is the sponge, but it's also the ramming staff on the other end. So I have 2 functions. The first one, the wet sponge, as Gary keeps his thumb over the vent hole, I run the wet sponge down that is extinguishing the embers, and he keeps it airtight. So when I pull it out, if there's any debris left in there, the vacuum will suck it out. You hear the gun go pop when I pull out the sponge. If I don't hear it go pop, I do it again. Sponge. When I'm ready to receive a round, I bring the ramming end, staff end around, and I'll tap the tap of the barrel, so that means feed me.
Right. So there's another difficult signal. So the gunner now knows that we're ready for the receive the round. Number 2 is standing there waiting for receiving. So at this point, the gunner will make an assessment. He may, before he does that, we have a little pendulum sight that hangs from here with a little lead weight on the bottom, graduated scale. And we can line up with that sight on the end and actually change the elevation up or down with this, or call for the trailing arm to be moved left or right. When he's satisfied with all that, and he's decided on what kind of round he's going to projectile, we'll call back to the ordnance person that's handling the limber. Say, like, shell, 2-second fuse, and they'll repeat shell, 2-second fuse. And then I'll ask to advance the round for our powder monkey here. He'll show me the rounds, and I will, just to make sure that he understood the right thing.
So now at this point he's handing me over the round. I come underneath the gun to stay safe. Bring it up. And then, step out of the way. Round in.
Now there's a particular way you ram it, because by chance if there's anything that will set this gun off, this is a unitary round with the powder charge and it straps to the projectile. So as I ram it, if there's anything down there, it could set the charge off. So it's a safety precaution. I keep my thumb underneath the staff, and when I ram it, I'll go past the barrel and lean over the axle, so in case it does go off, I'm not hurt. And that's also why both Jeremy and I are wearing coats. You have to wear coats in these first 2 positions for safety reasons. Now wait 5 seconds. They'll go off. I'll pull it out, and I'll announce ram.